Hello, and welcome to the Scrum Pulse webinar, moving to an Agile Product Operating Model, an evidence-based approach. Thank you for taking the time today to listen to this webinar. I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes you never know, hopefully it will take about 45 minutes. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to email me. I'll give you those coordinates in a moment. Or of course, use the YouTube comment section. Feel free to type those comments in. That's what all the cool kids do, so I hear. So who am I? Before we get into the content, maybe, and if you're going to contact me, maybe you want to know who I am. My name is Dave West. I'm the CEO here at Scrum.org, and there's my contact information, LinkedIn, Twitter. LinkedIn's always a great way to get me as well, and obviously Twitter, or should I say X, and then my old email address there. So let's get into the content, shall we? Oh, Scrum.org, just in case you don't know, this is a Scrum.org webinar. I'm the CEO of Scrum.org. We're in the business of helping people and teams solve complex problems, training, certification, and lots of content like this webinar. And my boss, the chairman of the board, is Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum. As you can imagine, sprint reviews with him are always amusing. Okay, now let's get into the content. So to put some context to the story that I'm going to be laying out in front of you today, the world that we live in today is a continuous set of opportunities or challenges, depending on how you look at it. In the previous age, the oil and mass production age, change happened in a very controlled way. You know, we had this idea that a small group of people worked on R&D, and then they scaled it from a manufacturing process into a system, built something, cars, planes, whatever it is, and then change was very regulated. Out of that, variability was moved out the system as quickly as possible. In the digital age, that is not the case. Change happens continuously. We have not only an opportunity to deliver value continuously, with the channels, the internet, the cell phones, the electronic mediums that we all use every day, but also the environment that we're delivering into is continuously changing, both the technology, whether that's upgrades, security, patches, etc., or whether the opportunity. Maybe we want to take advantage of generative AI or LLMs, etc., or maybe take advantage of the new Apple Watch that's just come out that provides you with increased amount of biometric data. The reality is the world we live in is in this continuous change situation. And that means that the systems that we developed for the previous age, the age of oil and mass production, are no longer sufficient to work in that way. And that is predominantly why Agile, born out of software, which was always in this age, has become such a popular way of looking at the world. But Agile might not be enough, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. To work in this new way is nothing that I'm going to surprise you. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. There's lots of evidence that we know how to work in this. In fact, every time you have a production outage, a crisis at work, you know that you operate in this way. You decide on what to focus on. Let's call that business strategy, or in the case of a production outage, it may be very clear what you have to focus on. You build a team rapidly around that, focused on the customer, the outcomes, the problems that you're trying to solve, the strategy that you have in place. You help that team, support that, empower them so that they can effectively deliver value in the most effective way. And you create an organization around that to make sure that they're successful. They work in a very clear model: do, learn, plan, do, learn, plan, do, learn, plan, do, learn, plan, because they're delivering stuff based on hypotheses or assumptions. They're validating those assumptions by actually executing and delivering. In Scrum, we call that the increment, right? We get that rapid feedback. We're like, ooh, people didn't use it the way we thought. And then you iterate. In situations that are highly safety oriented, the way in which we deliver may be different. The feedback obviously is going to be different as well, but ultimately we run to that same rhythm. And of course, everything is transparent. We review everything frequently to ensure that we're going in the right direction. Because Unfortunately, though our business strategy is obviously the right one, it might not be. So we need to validate it and pivot accordingly. And then things that get in the way of us effectively delivering, that undermine that environment, we manage, size, dependencies, impediments, etc. And all those great ideas that you probably have read lots of books about and are probably very familiar with, like agile, like flow, like design thinking, lean startup, all of that stuff, lean UX, I mean, the list goes on, are all aligned to this new way of dealing with this complex, ever-changing environment. So really, really simple. Unfortunately, though, the environment that we continue to see, when I was an analyst at Forrester Research, gosh, what was that? Almost 16 years ago, 15 years ago. God, it seems a long time, doesn't it? I did some research that said, Agile and Scrum was incredibly popular. But the reality was that most organizations were very agile, but of course they only do planning once a year, once every 6 months, once every 18 months. But they're very agile. And they only release 4 times a year because the customer doesn't want it. And everything's about work. They have a water scrum fall, very much a project-based mindset that ultimately undermines their ability to be agile in this brave new world. And that continues to be the case. Now, maybe some of these things that I've written on this little chart, work backlog, no sprint goal, definition of ready, so you only work on things you really well understand, that are well thought through, analysis paralysis type things, status of work meetings, and a management review in your sprint review. And of course, it's all about velocity. Are there things that maybe you're doing in your own organization, or maybe not, hopefully not. Um, so these are some of the characteristics that I see over and over again that reinforce and have created that water scrum fall that I mentioned earlier. Business strategy is complex and unclear. The way in which the business strategy is being communicated through the processes, particularly when it hits digital, particularly when it hits the opportunity that digital age is creating, it's a little bit messy. Things don't clearly connect. Your OKRs, if you're using OKRs, or whatever mechanism you're using to describe work and goals through the life cycle, and through the investment model, there's massive gaps and there's huge translations between those. The other thing that's really, really interesting that we continue to see is, on purpose, usually in most organizations, there's a very big gap between business and technology. It's funny, you go to a financial services company. Financial services company is ultimately a technology company. And there's no bags of money, or there's very rarely bags of money. I wish there was. Yes, there are premises. Yes, they do their systems are all about finance, lending, providing, investing, whatever those things are. However, they're digital, however, they still separate business and technology, and those two organizations are disconnected. Now, that it is true, there is, in the same way as the premises, the infrastructure of the organization has a separate sort of reporting structure, the people that buy buildings, etc. Technology needs to some of that. However, ultimately, the integration is where the magic happens. So that disconnect is really emphasizing this water scrum fall, and reducing our ability excuse me, our ability to respond to the reality of the world around us. We continue to see organizations built around skills, applications, departments, name whatever you want. But ultimately, these power structures, these organizational constructs, inhibit our ability to build cross-functional teams. So people, they're on like 15 projects because their skills very specialized. And instead of looking at that as a problem and solving it, by maybe pulling that person out of teams and making them responsible to help those 10 teams that they were previously on and be successful, they continue to have that as a bottleneck, because ultimately it's in the interest of that person around promotion and power and status, to do that, and it's hard to change, so the organization has a level of inertia there. empowerment support, that organizations tend not to empower teams. Making decisions is hard, because if you make them and they're incorrect, well, that's problems, right? So it's better to have massive organization decision making happen, because that reduces risk. It really doesn't, but it makes personal risk less, obviously. And it allows us to sort of like continue, have lots of meetings, feel like we're incredibly busy, but not really get that much done. Um, and everybody's focused on risk, not innovation, particularly if you have an existing customer base, an existing portfolio of products, etc. A lot of planning. Planning happens continuously. It's interesting. Planning happens continuously, but there's never any good plans. And of course, it's all about status, progress, burn downs, etc., velocity, because we're managing cost and risk. This may be not the reality that you see ahead of you, but it's the reality I see in many organizations to some extent. Now, that does not mean that these organizations are not getting incredible value out of Scrum. Scrum is a great way of doing work. Scrum is a great way of organizing a backlog, delivering increments continuously, even if that's to some sort of integration test environment. But they're not getting the benefit of innovation. They're not getting, maybe you're not getting the benefit of really empowering these teams and getting that collective wisdom of the whole organization behind you. So this is a great example of the challenge that organizations see in the space program that's currently running at the moment in the United States of America. This is really interesting. I point you at this article on Arts Technia or whatever. I don't know how you say that name of that website, but it's a brilliant website, and I recommend it. It's got all sorts of long articles on some of the most interesting things that are happening in the world. I love it. But in 2024, they wrote this article about the space program. Now, I'm a, like many of us, I love space. I think it's super. Star Wars. I remember lining up in 1977 with my mum outside the Odeon Cinema in Leicester, where I was born, and unfortunately we didn't get in. We were in the line, and then they only had one seat left when we got there. And my mum said, "I'm not letting you sit on your own at the cinema. You're 7." So that was the end of that. I did go and see it, but not for a while because we only used to go to Leicester, to the city, once in a while. But anyway, I digress. So we're all into space, right? Well, many of us are. So probably you've been following the difference between the Boeing CST-100 Starliner program and the SpaceX program. Both these programs were initiated by NASA to put people back into space. Obviously, with the space shuttle program was decommissioned because of the disasters and the unfortunate loss of life that happened with them. The US didn't have a manned space program for a long time. In fact, we even put in satellites in through either the Russian space program or the European space program or others, right? And that's kind of disappointing. United States, JFK created this idea that we would put a man on the moon, and not because it is easy or not, it's because it is hard. We've all heard that black and white clip, right? And get inspired by JFK, which is really cool. But so these two space programs were initiated this space program was initiated by NASA to get manned spaceflight, and they actually had decided sensibly to have two vendors participate. I don't want to call them primes, because I don't know how you can be two primes, but two vendors. One, Boeing, who has a proven track record of delivering some amazing programs for the US government, of which they were heavily involved in Apollo and Mercury and previous space programs, and obviously the space shuttle. And so they gave them the majority of the funding. They gave them over $4 billion. There was this startup driven by this kind of eccentric at the moment, very eccentric leader, the Elon Musk. And Elon Musk and SpaceX had, been starting this program. This was many years ago. They'd done some work, and they were like, well, we don't want to put all our eggs in the Boeing basket. This is NASA. So we're gonna invest in both these programs. But we're only going to give SpaceX, because we're pretty sure they're going to fail horribly, $1 billion. So Boeing had a little bit over a billion, 4 billion. SpaceX had a little bit over 1 billion. And this is all public record. Obviously, it's US taxpayers' money, my money going there. So it's all very public, and the discussions about this were public, the tenders were public, et cetera, et cetera. Now, and these programs started working. Now, obviously, everybody's very aware of the failures of the Boeing Starliner program. The fact that currently there's a pair of astronauts stuck in space. And throughout the program's life over the last longer, almost 10 years, it's been a continuous collection of challenges. And in parallel, SpaceX have continued to do some amazing things, very empirically, very incrementally, but they've continued to increase their capability to put bigger and bigger things into space. And obviously, the most complicated thing, human beings in space, and get them back. Getting them into space is much easier if you don't have to get them back. Anyway, and it's really summed up. And when I read that article and the other articles, I was very sort of aware of a fundamental theme. And I've titled it Project to Product, because if you read this, and obviously Laurie Garver gave a very succinct description of the difference between these two companies: culture, design philosophies, decision-making structured, allowed SpaceX to excel in a fixed price environment where Boeing stumbled after getting lots more money. And when you read these articles, these are some of the highlights or lowlights that sort of stand out. There was incredibly complex handoffs in the Boeing program, because they had teams that were specializing, that handed off to other teams in this very complicated project culture. There was multiple milestones where actual subcontractors were being paid on, and those milestones ultimately didn't actually make progress. I mean, they did make progress, but they weren't measuring outcomes. They were measuring artifacts. They were very focused on a project management model. They were very much focused on resource management. They were very much focused on, ensuring that costs were kept down. They were managing against variances. Whereas the SpaceX organization were focused on a mission. They built an organization around that mission. Yes, they did use subcontractors, but they were very much core or context. They had a very clear idea of what core and context. They kept it simple. They didn't have this very complicated project management milestone-based approach. They also didn't have that many middle managers and complex hierarchies. Their design philosophy was simple, incremental, experimental, empirical in approach. They incrementally tested ideas. They actually put satellites, some of us are using, maybe on the internet today, are using Starlink today, and it allowed them to test ideas, which they then brought into the main human program. It was a perfect example, I believe, of project versus product mentality. And we all know what's happened now. Finally, after many delays, Starliner and Boeing managed to put 2 astronauts into space and get to the International Space Station. Unfortunately, those astronauts are stuck there and will be stuck there for many months. I have no idea what they're doing for underwear and toiletries, but maybe they've got spares. Maybe they're like one of those Holiday Inns, or you can phone down to reception and get it. But these 2 poor astronauts, Barry Wilmore and Sunita Williams, are stuck on the International Space Station because the actual spaceship that they were wanting to go on and come back isn't trustworthy. Now, Boeing have landed their spaceship, but it was just too risky to put human beings in. And SpaceX is going to pick them up in February. I think that's an example of where, this water scrum for this project mentality this disconnected design philosophy focus really, it's a great example of where these challenges all come to bear and ultimately undermine our ability to innovate in this modern age. And I think it's a poster child, if that's a good word, to describe the difference between project to product. So when I was reading these articles, you could see it all over that Boeing, who, by the way, is an amazing organization with amazing engineers, some of the smartest people in America in aerospace and aeronautics work for Boeing. They've done amazing things, and I fly on their planes regularly. So they're a super cool organization. In fact, I visited them once, and to that big hangar, it was super cool. So they're an amazing organization. However, they were undermined by their project culture, because historically that's how they'd always worked for the government, with this sort of project model, very output centric, where they were very fixed in the structure, as it were, though they were, they time scope costs was the thing that were managing. They had resources moved in and moved out continuously. They were managing against cost variance and acceptance to these milestones. Whereas SpaceX, focused, permanent. They have a mission. Their mission is to help humanity become a multi-planet species, which is a heck of a big mission, by the way. I mean, imagine that on your on your mission statement, right? Now they're very much focused on now not revenue, use, profit, or maybe use, but SpaceX were looking at outcomes, right? Looking at outcomes. Hey, we need to get a rocket to this place, and it needs to be reusable, and we need to manage the cost, and we need to, because it's a fixed price contract, and we know what the boundaries are. Let's go for it. And they had very clear measures. So when you look at that, there's three things that really help me think what the difference is, what product really brings to the table. And that's mindset, alignment, and how we invest. Let's look at those three things. Mindset. The mindset of SpaceX and any organization that really lives in this product mindset, or this product operating model, which we'll talk about in a moment, approach every problem with a view of stakeholders, users, outcomes, dependencies, ownership, value. They think of it as a product that has value, a product that has a clear cost. Now, we're not customer centric as such, we're product centric. Yes, customers are an incredibly important point, and users are an incredibly important point to our product. In fact, we wouldn't have one if we didn't have those people, but we're delivering it in the context of an organization. So ROI, cultural fit, connection to the mission, all those things become, or objectives, business mission, business objectives, become incredibly important. So mindset, alignment. What SpaceX did a fantastic job in doing, perhaps because they didn't have the legacy that Boeing had, and the history and the experience. Legacy is both good because you comes with lots of experience, but it's bad because it often creates inertia and creates, a desire not to change in the organization. They organize, structure, and manage to a product model. So they have the idea of what the products are, and maybe that's, turtles all the way down in the case of SpaceX. Maybe the flight capsule is a separate product. Maybe the delivery vehicle is a separate product. Maybe the mission control is a separate product. I don't know. I've actually not been to SpaceX. I'm just basing it on the articles I read. However, whatever those products are, they understand and they have clear ownership. They have clear outcomes. Maybe they outsource a whole product. It's much easier to outsource a product than a subsystem that has to be integrated. Very clear understanding of customer stakeholders, etc. And also you obviously can get competitive situations there. Maybe you can sell that product separately if you're building it yourself into different contexts. They also plan and invest to a product within a portfolio driven by strategy. That's super important. Now, organizations can apply all of these things and they're the most successful, or maybe they can pick mindset as a way of at least looking at their projects in a different way. Maybe they can align around that mindset, but they're still investing from a project kind of approach. So when they do their quarterly business reviews, they have some sort of translation into the alignment and the mindset. However, the most successful organizations have all these three in place. So if we've got this product mindset and we've got this alignment and we're investing in this way, that then leads us to build an organization around this, which, if we're cool, we're calling an operating model, right? We're connecting that operating model to that philosophy, to the mindset, to the alignment, and to the investment. We also believe, and this is something I hold very strongly, that one of the problems that we have in many organizations that I see agility being delivered into is that everything is the same. I was at a pharmaceutical company the other day where there was a very web-oriented, front-endy kind of thing that was being delivered, and it still had to go through the sort of compliance steps of the governance process, because ultimately it was, that's how they managed risk, that's how they managed their portfolio, and obviously it was rubber stamped very quickly, but ultimately every product, every project that they're working to runs to the same SDLC and the same release process and goes through the same steps, which seems wrong. Each product has its own unique product operating model that determines its needs. Now, obviously, if you're an organization, you can't have crazy variability, so you have to manage that appropriately. But the idea that you build a operating model for a product and the people that are developing, delivering, maintaining, and supporting that product ultimately have ownership of that operating model is an important one. And of course, because it's agile, we can change. Now, for the agile people that are on this call, on this presentation, I maybe feel that this is the next evolution of our agile community. When agile was created and the ideas of Scrum, XP, and all the DSDM and the like, Crystal, it was very team focused. Then a whole multitude of scaling frameworks appeared: Scaled Agile, Safe, Scaled Scrum, Nexus, etc. Then the McKinsey, BCG, Accenture, Deloitte, the usual, took this and saw this opportunity to really clearly take these ideas to the business, and we got business agility. Now I think it's time to base all of the stuff we're working on and really start aligning around a product operating model and make that agile. What worries me is we're seeing a lot on product operating model in organizations, but ultimately those organizations are sort of forgetting the Scrum Agile stuff. So I think it's very important that we think of it as a agile product operating model. And at Scrum.org, we care very deeply about evidence, EBM, and the like. So it has to be evidence-based. So maybe it's the next evolution. Maybe not. We'll see, hey? But at the very least, it's an interesting set of ideas for how we organize in support of this digital age. So first, let's start with what an operating model is. No surprise there. We didn't invent it. It's been around for a long time. There's the Wikipedia definition, which I know isn't necessarily right, but abstract visual representation of how an organization is valued to its customers and beneficiaries. It's actually how it runs, right? Because it's product centric, think product at the thing. You've many approaches for describing it, value streams, or whatever. I happen to like the model where people, organization, process, governance, culture, and measures and incentives, but pick the model that suits you. But it needs to be driven by product. So that means you need to have obviously a strategy that defines where your products are. What if you're a fish and chip organization. No idea why I thought of that. I guess I'm feeling a little hungry. If you're a fish and chips organization, who doesn't like fish and chips? Then your strategy is around, you're going to be delivering the best fish and chips in the world. We've got a franchise model. We're going to be delivering this amazing user experience, blah, 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 whatever that strategy is. From that, you define a series of products. There's some products that are about engagement with the fish and chip eater. There's some products about delivering food. There's obviously a product that is something around managing the store inventories and stuff like that. And that's all defined in a product model. and then you operate it. So each one of those products has its own operating model to support it. Hopefully that makes sense. It all starts with what is a product. Now, this is where it gets a little bit dicey because every organization has its own perspective, and they're probably right. However, I think of a product having a clear boundary, known stakeholders, well-defined users and customers. Sometimes it can be an abstract thing, such as, something like around, if in the healthcare sector, it could be literally the definition of the product could be around a disease or some sort of challenge that humans have. Maybe it's, genetic heart murmurs or something, and then you deliver product to solve that. Or it could be something very physical, like a razor or a cell phone, right? Um, Provides a good or service to your organization. The best products, everybody understands what they are. Value is easy to measure and manageable inside. Shared services can be products. And in fact, increasingly, they're the most interesting products because if you think of a financial services organization, think about the internal systems that we're developing that support the brokers or support the help desk or support that. What if we can build a product portfolio around that? Then not only can we really have clarity on the investment, on we need to invest in this, its maturity, we know its age, we know all those things, but also potentially we could maybe take that product and sell it to another financial services company, right? If it's not competitive and it's just a product that we happen to be good at, but like AWS, remember? That was a product that was built in support of their business and then suddenly became a separate thing. I'm not saying every organization can do that, but it's a really interesting idea. It also allows you to do that buy build decision much easier because ultimately that's the boundary of the product. Oh, well, let's just buy that. That's not competitive to us. So that's also a really interesting idea. Projects still exist, they're not disappearing. However, the unit of currency for investing, the predominant unit of currency for investing is products. And projects may exist that go across many products. We can even use projects in a product if we wanted to manage the work. Not so sure about that, but maybe it would work. However, the unit that we really think about is this product model. So let's think about what a product is in a broader sense. A product needs a few things to really make sense. It needs a business roadmap. So, where is it going? How does it fit into strategy? What is the capabilities? What's its story from an outcome to the business perspective? That's in terms of users, obviously, and customers, but also in terms of other stakeholders that care deeply about it. Where is this product going? How does it fit into a broader narrative for the business? How is it supported with technology? What are those key technology events, as it were? Operational stability. How do we make it stable? What are the characteristics of this service that it's being provided, and are they changing over time? How do we decide who does what? Who's in control? Who makes decisions? Where does that decision-making process live? What's the governance and the flow of work? How do we know if we're getting value for money from this product in terms of its delivery, etc.? And what is the economics around it? What is it? What is the total cost of ownership or the total cost of value? Thinking about it in terms of the value it's delivering the organization, less the costs that it's doing. So it's got to be more than just we've got a product. You have to have these elements. Now, sometimes these elements are very simple. It's one sheet of paper, you get it, move on. Sometimes they're quite complicated, and take a significant amount of time for your product owners, your technologists, your business leaders to really understand how this product fits into the broader ecosystem of the organization. Then the product operating model that supports that. So if a product has all these elements, how does it work? Well, we're adding on to this people and organization, measures and incentives, processes, agile processes, because it's an agile product operating model, governance, culture, and behavior. Now, I could go on for hours about the characteristics of each of these elements. For instance, people in organization, I talk a lot about decoupling product development from people development. However, that's just one of the principles I hold dear when I'm looking at an organization that supports agility and a product outlook. At the end of the day, though, we have to build organizations that support teams and teams of teams to be self-managed and empowered. We have to basically build organizations and skill people so they can rapidly deliver value in this ever-changing landscape. So how do we do that? Well, every organization is going to be different. I've got some ideas, and maybe there'll be a presentation on that in the future, and I can share some of those things. Measures and incentives. The one thing that's very clear in organizations that move to an agile operating model or an agile product operating model is when measures and incentives do not align clearly to the outcomes that we're looking for, then you get a disconnect that ultimately undermines people. We're not coin operated. That would be a gross generalization. However, if we're being measured in a certain way and it's very clear and it has a material impact on our promotion or our bonus or whatever, then it's very likely that our behavior will change. We've all seen those Dilbert sketches, right? Agile processes, empirical, self-managed continuous improvement, continuously improving, improving how you work, and also improving the product that you're developing. And obviously, I believe Scrum needs to be at the heart of it. Obviously, there's a scaling element or a teams of team element. In fact, when you have an agile product operating model, one of the greatest things about this is it reduces the complexity of your organization in regard to that, because you're not managing all these multi-dependent resources and projects, etc. It's a lot more straightforward, which can help you have a much simpler process. Culture and behavior. We need to build an environment that allows transparency, that encourages focus and curiosity. I don't know how you do that. I have tried many things. Some of them work, some of them don't. Even with the same thing, I've tried twice. But ultimately, it's about psychological safety. It's about safety in general. It's about creating trust, fostering and bolstering that in an organization so that we have the ability to be curious. SpaceX has a fantastic culture, it appears from the outside, having never worked there, where they get the ability to do amazing things and they're supported in that journey. And then governance, which is different from process. Who's responsible? Who makes decisions? What's the distance and time it takes to make those decisions? Let's ensure that they're quick feedback loops. Let's empower people and push that down as much. But we need to be very clear, particularly if we're in a regulated industry, but even if we're spending other people's money, right? So we have a fiduciary responsibility to be very clear and concise in that. The last element is obviously evidence-based. It's a crucial part of our story, and it's a crucial part of our whole strategy at Scrum.org. In fact, Ken, whenever I bring to him an idea, which I do unfortunately regularly, he's a good believer in saying, okay, what are we trying to achieve and how do you measure it? And I'm like, well, and if I give him bogus measures, he definitely tells me I'm an idiot, which is fair, to be fair. And then we move on and we try to find what those key indicators are. Now, Ken, working with others, has developed something called EBM, evidence-based management, which was really inspired by the medical industry and their evidence-based medicine. But we think of it in terms of four main areas. Market value, organizational capability. Market value comprises of unrealized value. What is the opportunity there? And current value, both sustaining it, managing it, and making sure that it stays on point. And then we have ability to innovate, time to market as organizational capability. Now, EBM becomes important when we're thinking about two very important roles. Now, this is a Scrum.org webinar. We're talking about the Agile Product Operating Model, an evidence-based approach, but I'm sure many of you maybe have the accountabilities of Scrum Master or Product Owner. So how do you fit into this? So what I see very clearly is that Product Manager, Product Owner focuses on realized value and current value, and Scrum Master or Stroke Delivery Manager is about ability to innovate and time to market. Now, you might think ability to innovate is a responsibility of product, but it isn't. Ultimately, the delivery manager, Scrum Master, needs to build a system where innovation happens effectively, working with the team, and that they are ultimately accountable for that. That's what Scrum does. And obviously, cycle time, so time to market, is another key measure. Now, I'm conscious of time, so this is a really interesting topic that I'm sure we could spend hours talking about. And you see the center things, everybody's responsible for quality, governance, ethics, culture, etc. But these two leadership roles, I tend to focus them on using EBM, this unrealized value, current value, and then obviously ability to innovate and time to market. So, all right, the cynics here. You're going to say, well, hang on a minute. Product's going to be another thing. And there is definitely some propensity in organizations just to use the same old, rename everything with agile or safe or whatever, but it's still the same processes. And Craig Larman, who's incredibly smart, wrote these things called Larman's Laws of Organizational Behavior, which if you haven't had a chance, read them. They're sort of ironic, to say the least. Organizations hate change. Change is great when somebody else is changing. Will product model be the same? Well, I don't know. So we started exploring this and talking to some people to see what's happening in the world. There's obviously a lot of people writing about it. Marty Kagan, BCG, McKinsey, they're starting to talk about this. So there is a drive in the market around this and an increasing body of knowledge being developed. So we asked, about 4,205 people, whether they consider themselves in a product organization, and 73% of them said yes. Out of that 73%, 56.5% said they're part of an end-to-end value proposition, which sounds really, really exciting, which sounds great. But I'm a little cynical myself. So we also did something much less size. We started talking to our trainers and about their clients and we started looking at classes that we're running today, PSPO, etc., and using this 2x2 around empowerment. So are we empowering teams to make decisions, to be able to effectively manage this feedback loop in a most effective way? And are those teams working in a product life cycle? And there's some characteristics, particularly around, multiple projects, all this sort of stuff, or are they working in something else? And we found increasingly that yes, we have people all over the place. However, we're still in this bottom left quartile, which is really, really worrying. Though people may be in a product organization, though they may feel that they have some responsibility for an end-to-end value stream, they're still not empowered to make decisions, and there's still a lot of inefficiencies in the way in which they align to product. Change is hard. Product ain't going to change that, unfortunately, as we say about Scrum over and over again, right? It doesn't necessarily fix the problems, but it makes them visible. And I think product will do the same. So quickly, I know we talked about how we moved to this Agile Product Operating Model, and I've only got a few minutes, so I'm going to do this incredibly quickly. But ultimately, one product at a time from my experience. And when you're doing that, sometimes it's good just to try something completely new, or you could look at your existing organization and incrementally improve it. Both have a good track record of working. It depends on the culture and the situation you're in. The bottom line is that if you're trying to move to this APALM, you've got to do it in an agile way. Don't use a waterfall model to do it, even though that means you get bigger, if you're a consultant, bigger statements of work. You've got to work incrementally. The mindset is the most important place to begin, and that you can do today on your product backlogs and on your projects that you're working on by thinking more about the customer, by thinking about the boundaries, by thinking about stakeholders, by thinking about value. And that can really, really help. Okay, I know I said I'd be 45 minutes and I've been nearer 50, but apologies. Let's sort of bring it bring it home. Product, I believe, is an incredibly valuable approach to looking at this new world, to this digital age that we're in, to this environment where we're having all these challenges. I know that I'd much rather be part of SpaceX than Boeing with respect to the space race at the moment, and that's no disrespect for Boeing, who are an amazing organization who I have much respect for. However, some of the legacy has definitely inhibited them with respect to the Starliner program. The product provides structure, mindset, alignment, a way to invest. It can really help you think about it in that way. It seems to be a natural evolution of agility. After all, Scrum is all about product increment, product owner. Product is a fundamental part of Scrum, right? Each product needs a business roadmap, technology roadmap, an understanding of value, operational stability, governance. It's more than just saying this is a product. You have to think about it from business, technology, operational perspective, and finance perspective. The Agile Product Operating Model, you need to think then, if you're building these operating models to support your product, people, measures, incentives, processes, governance, culture. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I think we're at a point where if we can take these ideas of product and implement them in organizations, not only can we build organizations that are incredibly more effective with the use of digital technology, but we can also build organizations where everybody is empowered to deliver value. And those organizations are both enriching for the people that are in it, but also enriching for the shareholders and for their customers. So I believe product is an incredibly valuable approach. And thank you for spending the time listening to this Scrum Pulse on the Agile Product Operating Model and evidence-based approach. If you've got questions or comments, which I'm sure you have, feel free to reach out to me, or obviously put those comments in the YouTube comments section with all the cool kids. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time.